"You're a nobody. You don't matter," my mom said. "Honestly, we forget you exist half the time," my brother added. So I clinked my fork against my glass and replied, "This won't take long. It's just 3 sentences." By the second sentence, my mom's face had gone pale. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even blink. When you grow up with people like that, you learn to use your face like a shield. You learn not to react, at least not in ways they can use against you later. But yeah, that's how brunch began. They call it brunch, but it's really just Sunday lunch with mimosas and extra judgment. The food changes, but the atmosphere never does. We were halfway through some dry quiche when my mom decided it was time for her usual performance review. She treats these family meals like annual evaluations, except I never applied for the job. "You are a nobody," she said, as if commenting on the weather. "Don't pretend you matter." And Ryan, my younger brother, his greatest achievement is being in the same room as a Wi-Fi signal. Added, "Honestly, we forget you exist half the time." He laughed like it was a joke everyone was in on. I didn't laugh. I just reached for my glass, not dramatically, just a simple clink with my fork, and said, "This won't take long. Just 3 sentences." They both looked up from their food. "Please," I said, looking at my dad, "this copy is for you." Then I pulled a plain black folder from my bag and slid it across the table. No grand speech, no raised voice, just a small push across the linen tablecloth. Ryan looked confused, as if I were handing out resumes. Mark, the husband my mom married when I was 15 and who I stopped calling my dad the moment the papers were signed. Leaned forward, expecting concert tickets. But my mom, she didn't move. I just stared at it. Finally, she reached for the folder and opened it. Page 1, then 2, then 3. I watched her expression shift in slow motion, like someone realizing the brakes have failed and the wall is much closer than they thought. Her fingers began to tremble. Mark's smug expression vanished. Ryan's fork froze in midair, unsure whether to keep eating or run. She reached the final page. "You little bitch," she said, barely a whisper. Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the tile floor. "You said you deleted all that stuff." I stood up, adjusted my sweater, and picked up my bag. "The originals are already with people who matter," I said. "This is just for your personal enjoyment." And then I walked out. Let's rewind a moment. I had moved back in with them about 3 months before this lovely family brunch. I told them I couldn't afford my apartment anymore and needed help. My mom was reluctant to take me in. By reluctant, I mean she said yes, but made it clear I had to pay rent, do chores, and have no attitude. By the way, Ryan lives there too. No job, no rent, no chores. He contributes nothing but dirty dishes and unsolicited opinions. I was given the laundry room, not the guest room, not my old room. The laundry room. There's a dryer in there that rattles at night like it's possessed. Every time it shook the wall, I reminded myself just a little longer, just until I find what I need. Because I wasn't there to reconnect. I wasn't there because I had nowhere else to go. I was there because I knew there were things they never expected me to find, and I planned to find them, but none of that showed on my face at brunch. At brunch, I poured the orange juice. I passed the butter. I smiled when Mark made his weird jokes about millennials not knowing how to do laundry. Which was ironic since I was the one doing his. I said thank you when my mom handed me a napkin, as if she were doing me a favor. No one asked about my work. No one asked what I was working on. Okay? The closest I got to attention was, "Do you still drive that little car?" I got a mug for Christmas that said somebody's favorite daughter. Just funny because I'm pretty sure they forgot to wrap it until that morning. Ryan got a new smartwatch and a trip to Cancun for his mental health. I got to vacuum the stairs. So yeah, the moment at brunch wasn't planned. Not exactly, but it felt ready. And when I saw her face go pale, when I saw Mark's eyes dart toward the door as if calculating an escape route, and when I saw Ryan finally shut up, I knew. I had hit the mark. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to tell the truth. I wasn't nearly finished. You know how some people talk about their childhoods like they were sitcoms? Lots of inside jokes, family traditions, embarrassing birthday stories that are funny now. Yeah, mine wasn't like that. My childhood was less Full House and more Survivor, minus the prize money. From the outside, we looked normal. Holiday cards with forced smiles, family vacations that ended up in scrapbooks. A fridge covered in Ryan's terrible drawings as if he were the next Picasso. But inside was like growing up in a group project where I was the only one doing the work and still getting blamed for the bad grade. Ryan was always the golden child, the star, the one who could break things and be called spirited. Once, I knocked over a cup of juice and was sent to my room for being careless and dramatic. At one point, I genuinely wondered if they had forgotten I existed. One day when I was 9, I came home excited because I had won a small art contest at school. It wasn't a big deal, but I was proud. I showed my mom the certificate. She looked at it and said, "You should really focus more on science. Art won't get you anywhere." That same week, Ryan brought home a participation ribbon for Best Listener. She framed it. That kind of thing adds up. It wears you down in ways that aren't obvious from the outside. You start to wonder if maybe you're the problem. Maybe you really are less interesting, less likable, less worthy. The only person who didn't treat me like an afterthought was my dad. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He didn't make speeches or try to win Parent of the Year, but he was there. He helped with homework, made the best grilled cheese, and listened to me ramble about books, and he actually remembered what I said. He was steady and quiet. I never understood why my mom was so annoyed with him, as if his mere presence in a room was a personal insult. But she treated him the same way she treated me, which in retrospect says a lot. Still, I didn't question anything. Not until the day everything fell apart. I was 12, sitting in the living room, eating dry popcorn and watching a show I didn't care about. Ryan was upstairs. Mom was on her phone. She turned off the TV and said she had to show me something serious. That's never a good sign. She scrolled through her messages, held out the screen and said, "This is from your father. You need to see what kind of man he really is." The message was short, just one line. "If you take her, I'll kill you both." I remember staring at the screen, my brain glitching. She told me he was dangerous, that she'd always known something was wrong with him, and that she was filing for full custody to protect me. She rubbed my back as if she were the hero, telling me I didn't need to be scared anymore. I didn't even cry right away. I just sat there, stunned, like the floor had been pulled from under me and I was still in midair. Then came the court proceedings, the silence, the new rules. No phone calls, no visits, no "we'll figure it out." Just done. My dad was erased overnight, like he'd been edited out of the script, and I was told to be grateful. What followed were the rebuilding years, as my mom once called them, which is ironic because she never rebuilt anything. She just rearranged the control panel. I became her emotional punching bag, her live-in help, the child she didn't want, but had to manage. Ryan became louder, lazier, and meaner. I became invisible. She stopped pretending we were a family. It was clear I was there because she didn't want the bad look of sending her daughter to live with a man she claimed was unstable. But the love, the kindness, the basic human decency was all gone. I didn't think about my dad for a long time. Not really. I put him in a box labeled dangerous and closed the lid. But some things don't stay buried, especially when they never made sense to begin with. Too many things didn't add up. There were too many moments when I'd hear someone talk about their dad and feel a strange ache, as if I were grieving a death no one acknowledged, and the message itself never felt right. My dad wasn't that kind of person. He was the kind of guy who cried watching Finding Nemo, the kind of guy who apologized if he raised his voice even slightly. The kind of guy who told me he loved me every single time we talked. But I never said anything out loud, because if you start questioning one lie, you have to question all of them. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Fast forward to my 20s. The ache got louder, the questions got heavier. And one day, I picked up my phone and sent a message to a number I wasn't even sure still worked. I said, "Hi, I don't know if this is still your number, but I wanted to say hello, Leah," he replied. 15 minutes later, and that's when everything began to unravel. I didn't go back after brunch. Not after the folder landed on the table and my mom's face crumpled, though her pride wouldn't let it finish. I walked out and didn't look back. I didn't take leftovers. I didn't even grab my coat. It wasn't that cold, and honestly, I needed the dramatic exit more than I needed sleeves. I checked into a short-term rental under a fake last name. Nothing dramatic, just enough to keep things quiet while the blast radius settled. 2 hours later, my brother texted me, "What the hell did you just do?" Followed by, "Mom's having a meltdown." Mark's yelling, "You won't tell me what's going on." Didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because I really did want to let them sit in it. Let them sweat through their polo shirts and wonder how the whole house of lies suddenly caught fire. I wish I could say I had a master plan from the start. But the truth is, it began as a hunch on a really bad night. I was 23 and couldn't sleep. I'd been thinking about that message for weeks. It's the one my mom showed me when I was 12. "If you take her, I'll kill you both." The thing that made me cut my dad out of my life like he was a disease. The thing that made me afraid of my own memories. But the older I got, the more it didn't add up. My dad was the kind of guy who made pancakes shaped like animals, who used phrases like safety first unironically. He wasn't the type to send violent death threats. So one night I texted him, "Hi, I don't know if this is still your number, but I wanted to say hello." He replied 15 minutes later, "Leah, I've been waiting 10 years for this." We met in a park 3 days later on neutral ground. I half expected him to look different, colder, as if the version I remembered was just childhood wishful thinking. He looked the same, just a bit grayer, a bit smaller. We sat on a bench and made it through a second cup of coffee before I asked about the message. He didn't flinch. He just shook his head slowly and said, "I didn't write it. I didn't send it. I never would." He didn't beg or cry. He just said he was sorry. He understood why I hadn't believed him. The weirdest part, I believed him, not because he had proof, but because my gut stopped screaming the second he said it. So I started digging. At first, I didn't know what I was looking for. I wasn't a hacker. I wasn't a conspiracy theorist. I was just a daughter who wanted to know what really happened. So I did something about it. Trained, got certified, and became a licensed private investigator, a full-on pie. Not the trench coat kind, the legal, boring paperwork kind, digital forensics, record pulls, metadata, bank tracing. And once I had that in place, I moved back home. I told my mom I'd lost my job, said I couldn't afford rent, said I needed a little help getting back on my feet. She rolled her eyes and told me I could have the laundry room perfect. While she handed me dish duty and made sure I contributed, I started looking and eventually I found it. It began with an old laptop shoved behind some sweaters. Password protected, but nothing I couldn't get into. Inside were folders with sloppy names like Legal One and Assets Backup and, I kid you not, do not open. I opened it. There was a draft of the message, the fake one. "If you take her, I'll kill you both." Typed in a Word doc 5 days before the date she claimed it was sent. There were notes in the margins, revisions. There was even a comment bubble that said, "Too dramatic." But that wasn't the worst part. I found emails between her and Mark from when they were still just friends, talking about how to make my dad look unstable, how to protect the money. And speaking of money, she claimed my dad had made a bad investment during the divorce and that half their assets had just disappeared. But in another folder, because of course she backed everything up, I found scanned bank records, wire transfers to an offshore account. Fake shell companies, all set up under Mark's name. They stole everything, framed my dad, took the house, the business assets, and the custody agreement, leaving him with nothing but a reputation he didn't deserve. So, yeah, I printed it all, made copies, and gave one to my dad. The one I slid across. The table at brunch. That was just a souvenir. Back to the present. 3 nights after I walked out, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. It was Dad. He didn't say hi. He just stood there with a tired smile and said, "I got the call. It's happening." The lawyer had filed everything, reopened the case, and started the process to get the money, the house, and his reputation cleared. It was already in motion. He came inside. I made tea. We sat on the couch as if it were a totally normal week. Then I said, "Do you want to know how I found it?" He nodded. So I told him. Not the whole thing, not yet, but enough. When I was done, he just said, "You didn't have to do this." And I said, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for me." Then the text started from Ryan. "What's going on? Are you seriously blowing up the family over ancient history? This is way too far. You made her cry." Then from my mom, one line. "You're not done. Don't think you're done." Charming. I didn't answer any of them because I knew exactly what was coming. And they had no idea just how much I had left to say. It didn't take long. The legal letter arrived 2 days after my dad filed. Certified mail. A thick envelope. The kind that makes people go quiet when they see it in the mailbox. I wasn't there when it arrived, obviously, but I heard about the scream. Apparently, my mom opened it in the kitchen, read the first page, and dropped her wine glass. Read in the middle of the day. Mark tried to play it cool, which was hilarious considering he was named directly on page 2. I can only imagine how fast he Googled what happens when offshore accounts get traced. And Ryan, poor Ryan, was still texting me like I was just going through something. "You don't have to do this. We can fix it." Fix what exactly? The fake message, the stolen money, the fact that they treated me like a spare part for 20 years? Sorry, buddy. That ship has sailed. The court filings were solid. Emails, drafts, bank records, all there in black and white. My folder wasn't just receipts. It was the whole damn audit. The judge moved quickly, not out of vengeance, but clarity. He said it was a pattern of deception that compromised custody, finances, and personal safety. Translation: they lied repeatedly on paper for years. The ruling: full restitution. Every penny they stole had to be paid back with penalties and interest. They had to sell the house, the cars, the investment accounts. Mark even tried to argue that he didn't know what was happening, that he trusted his wife's financial planning, which would have been more convincing if he hadn't literally signed the wire. Transfers. They sold the house within 3 weeks at a loss. My mom moved into a 2-bedroom condo with a leaky faucet and no insulation. And for once in her life, she didn't host a housewarming. But she wasn't done being dramatic. About a week after the ruling, she took one last swing. She created a Facebook account in my name. It's the same photo, the same bio, even copied one of my old posts, word for word. Then she started writing unhinged updates claiming my dad abused her, that I was unstable, and that we had hacked her accounts. It was pathetic. It's also stupid because it took about 15 minutes for the digital forensics guy to trace the IP address. Back to her house. Same Wi-Fi, same browser history, same laptop she used to stream her Pilates classes. The judge didn't even get angry. Just stared at her as if she were a math problem with no solution. "It's Hartwell," he said. "You fabricated a message, stole from your ex-husband, and now you're impersonating your daughter online." She tried to cry. It didn't work. Even Mark wouldn't look at her. As for Ryan, he disappeared the second the money ran out. No loyalty, no apology. Just a quiet unfollow on Instagram. And I assume a frantic job search for something that didn't require a resume or accountability. He never texted again. Fine by me. My dad bought a house. Not a mansion, just a modest little place with a real yard and a porch that gets good light in the afternoon. He called it peaceful, which is code for not haunted by my ex-wife's voice. Echoing through the drywall, invited me over the day he got the keys. When I walked in, he handed me a mug of coffee and said, "No big speech, just thanks." And that was enough. We sat in silence for a while. Not awkward silence, just the kind where your body finally remembers it doesn't have to flinch anymore. He asked what I was going to do next. I told him, live. As in, I could finally live without having to build myself from scratch. He nodded. Good plan. A week later, I got an email from my mom. Yes, email. The subject line, "You'll understand one day." The message was what you'd expect. Lots of, "I did what I had to," and "you betrayed your own family, and you always were ungrateful." She signed it, "Love, Mom." I didn't reply. I just archived it and labeled the folder Unsolicited Fiction. There was no big announcement, no TikTok reveal, no essay on healing. I didn't want revenge. I wanted quiet. And that's exactly what I got. No more explaining myself. No more justifying why I felt like a guest in my own family. Just silence. Kitchen with real food. Okay? A living room that feels like mine. A dad who makes silly jokes and never uses them to hurt me. They used to say I was a nobody. Said it to my face, behind my back, at brunch. But the funny thing about nobodies is, we watch. We pay attention. We learn how systems work, especially broken ones. And when we finally speak, we don't scream. We bring documents. They said I didn't matter. Turns out I was the only one keeping track of everything. Some days I still wonder if I went too far, if I could have handled it more quietly. Maybe I should have just let it go and built my life without stirring up everything they tried to bury. But then I remember how long I stayed quiet. How much I let slide. How much they counted on me doing exactly that. So, no, I don't regret it. But I'm still curious what you think. Did I do the right thing? Would you have walked away or handed over the folder? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe.